Let's talk some Tar Heels right now. And Carolina has been beating up on the little brothers over the last week. And they're getting a little excited, the Carolina fans. Hey, we're on the road back. We're scoring a lot of points. We're playing great defense. But guys, is it too little too late following that very poor quad one performance for North Carolina and head coach Hubert Davis, Kerry Keating?
Yeah, let me take an overall look at this because there's a lot to dissect about Carolina we've been talking about the last few weeks here. I think Carolina is going to make itself the poster child for how important the net ranking is. Because when you just take that net ranking, which takes a lot of different factors in, and we really don't know unless Bubba Cunningham makes us aware of how they get to these decisions. And obviously, it just so happens that Bubba Cunningham is the chairman of the committee this year. What a coincidence. Carolina is squarely in the tournament if you just went by net ranking, right? And the reason why they are is because of the schedule that they played prior to the ACC. In normal years, and David, you can attest to this way better than I can. Their quad one would not just be stuffed with 11 games. It would be close to the 15 or even 20 if we had more quad one teams in the ACC. The reason for that is a whole nother topic of discussion. I think Carolina becomes that team that the committee says, hey, they went out and played enough teams. Now, the pundits will say, but they were only 1-10 in quad one. You can't punish a team for your league not being up to snuff if you went out in your non-conference. And this, to me, is the Gonzaga model. We went through this in the WCC forever. Gonzaga kind of jumped the shark and was so much better than everybody. They had to go out and what we call schedule their non-conference within their conference and then vice versa. In a way, de facto, that's what Carolina has done. This would be probably not a discussion, even if they were 3-8 in quad one right now. I mean, quad one wins are clearly the topic of discussion. They've made quad one this important. They've put themselves in that discussion by playing the game. Did they win them? No. 1-10. Obviously, that Duke game looms very, very large at the end of the season for other reasons, just for the fact it's always a big game at the end of the year, no matter where it is. I'm really curious to see if Carolina can hold on to that, keep taking care of business, obviously leading into that Duke game, and keep winning the games, which they've done. They've had a shift since Hubert lifted that weight off his shoulder and kind of made the announcement, we're going to hire a GM. The contract extension that came out apparently was agreed to even before the season. How they announced that. There's things that Hubert obviously knew and didn't know about his team, but really what he needed to know was how he was going to be able to set himself up for the future. Once he kind of lifted that weight, the team has responded in a way that they're playing better. Not a coincidence, in my opinion. Can that carry into the postseason? What helps Carolina in this case, and we just had a long discussion about whether they should even have this anymore, is they'll get some more games and chances to keep winning in the ACC tournament. Their matchups may be more important to them than anyone else in the tournament because they're going to need a few more of those. So it'll be interesting to see when the bracket shapes up, who they get matched up against. But going into this last week, got to win. You just have to win. Just got to keep taking care of business. And then again, that Duke game, and what a better way to finish the season, not just against Duke, but when you're Carolina, and as David talked about, when you have that type of desperation and ulterior motive to play, Clemson being that example of maybe playing for the third time in 70 years in the ACC final. Now you've got an ulterior motive if you're at the micro for Duke and for Carolina. For Carolina, not just the big Duke because that's what Hubert seemingly has success doing in ending Coach K's career that way. But now it's a chance to really not take all of the questions out by beating one of the top two teams, obviously, in the country in Duke.
Yeah, Mike, let me underline one thing that Coach Keating said because it is right on point. As crazy as it might sound, if Carolina's 1-10 record against quad one were tweaked just a little and it was 3-8, there is zero doubt that the Tar Heels would be invited to this NCAA tournament. That's how important those crown jewel victories are. And if you're skeptical about the truth of that statement, let me give you an example. The Clemson Tigers are currently projected as a 5 seed, which is pretty darn good. They are obviously one of the 3 best teams in the ACC. Clemson has that great win over Duke at Littlejohn Coliseum. Clemson has that great win over the Kentucky Wildcats. You know what the Tigers' 3rd best win this season is? As we speak, you could call it SMU. They went to Dallas and beat the Mustangs, but SMU might not be an NCAA tournament team. You could say they beat Wake Forest. That's another nice win. Wake might not be an NCAA tournament team. You might think it's the Pitt win at Pitt. Pitt doesn't look like an NCAA tournament team. You can say the Clemson Tigers' third best win is over the Tar Heels. Well, maybe, but the Tar Heels might not be an NCAA tournament team. So Clemson has two crown jewels, Duke and Kentucky, and those two crown jewels, without a whole lot of substance behind that, have Clemson as a 5 seed. So it is not at all an exaggeration to say what Coach Keating said about the difference between 1-10 in quad one, even 2-9, or of course 3-8 in quad one would have you in. And part of this answer, by the way, even though Mike Waddell's original question was about the Tar Heels specifically, you can apply a lot of these principles that we're applying to the Tar Heels bubble status to Wake Forest. You can apply it to SMU. And until their slide recently, you could have applied it to the Pitt Panthers, the 4 bubble teams we've had in the ACC for a matter of weeks now. Here's the challenge, and Coach Keating hit on this as well. But let me give you an example from outside the league. Oklahoma is a bubble team. Oklahoma now of the SEC. And the Sooners' overall record is not very good at all. It's 17-12, which sounds like the definition of mediocrity, right? But the Oklahoma Sooners have head-to-head non-conference wins over, get this, Arizona, Michigan, and Louisville. I mean, the Sooners are only 4-12 in the SEC. That's a horrific conference record. But those same Sooners may make the big dance because of those 3 absolutely enormous crown jewel wins outside the league over Arizona, Michigan, and Louisville, all of which, of course, will be in the tournament, because that trifecta for Oklahoma, put aside the mediocre overall record, put aside the lousy conference record, that trifecta of victories is far better than any of the ACC's bubble teams can offer right now. Right now, UNC has 1 win over a school we're sure would get an at-large invitation. 1. It's the UCLA victory. Wake Forest has 1 win over a school we know would get an at-large bid. That's the Michigan game. And believe it or not, SMU, right on the bubble, has 0 wins over any teams that we know would get an at-large bid. These schools' their other best wins are over fellow bubble teams or probable NIT teams. And that historically is almost never enough to get into the big dance. The bottom line is right back to Coach Keating's point. If your best wins remain what they are right now, if Wake doesn't go to Duke and beat the Devils, if Carolina doesn't host Duke and beat the Devils this coming Saturday, if none of these teams we're talking about from the ACC bubble goes to Charlotte at the ACC tournament and beats some combination of Louisville or Clemson or Duke, just adding those crown jewel victories, I'm telling you right now, it applies to all 4 of those bubble schools. If you don't add any crown jewel victories, you will be left out. Not might. You will be left out on Selection Sunday. So what are your paths? Well, you can win the ACC tournament. That's always a path. The crown jewel event of the league, automatic bid goes to the conference tournament champion. That's in play for everybody who's invited to Charlotte next week. You can beat Duke if you're Wake or Carolina. That would be an enormous step in the right direction. And then your third option is, again, going to Charlotte and beating if you keep winning, you'll eventually run into some combination of Clemson, Louisville, Duke. And you just have to add 1 or more of those wins, or you're going to be left out. And that's why the ACC as a 3-bid league is still a possibility. I'm guessing that 1 or more of these bubble teams, for our perspective here in North Carolina, we hope the Deeks and the Heels both get in. Just makes it more fun for everybody in our audience and for us as well. But all of those ACC bubble teams for now must upgrade their resumes or they're going to get left out.
David, hop back to something that Coach Keating talked about, and that's Hubert Davis's contract extension that was agreed to last summer, but not signed until recently. What is the reason for that delay? Is that subterfuge, or is that just modern day negotiations and legalese, tapping into your attorney hat in the day's world of college basketball?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned legalese, because I'm telling you, for those who don't know, public universities have to do things a certain way, right? Private universities, if you're Wake or Duke, There are certain things you have to disclose publicly, but a whole lot of things you never have to share with the media, with the general public, with your own fan base. It's discretionary what you choose to share at it for the most part at those private universities. Carolina has been caught repeatedly not sharing things publicly that they're supposed to share publicly. So as an attorney here in North Carolina, I'd rather they do it the way the law tells them to do it in this context and other contexts. But whatever, they had a verbal agreement last summer. They didn't sign the deal until December. Sometimes that does happen because as a guy who practiced contract law specifically, I can tell you that there's a process between people making a verbal agreement and leaving the room after shaking hands and then writing everything they thought they agreed to into a mega page document. There's a whole lot of phone calls after the verbal agreement where you say, hey, the buyout is this, right? And you agreed to, if he walks away, he has to pay the school what? And what percentage of his total compensation is a part of a buyout? Like, sometimes people shake hands and they don't dot all the I's and cross the T's. I can promise you that. In fact, when you have clients who do, they're dream clients. They are the exception. So anyway, it's a fair argument to say it takes a while between the verbal and the signed, approved by the Board of Trustees, publicly available document. So maybe you want to give the Tar Heels some benefit of the doubt there. I do think in the broader perspective, and for folks have asked, why did even Hubert get a contract extension? Well, remember, the timing of the agreement was fresh off an ACC regular season title. It was not fresh off this up and down, topsy-turvy fourth season for Hubert as the head coach of the Tar Heels. So timing matters. Also, remember, we're in this quickly evolving world that we often get Mike Waddell's AD perspective on, Coach Kerry Keating's coach's perspective on. So many rules have changed that Carolina ultimately decided when push comes to shove, listen, bad coaches don't go all the way to the national title game in year one. They don't go into Cameron Indoor Stadium and beat Mike Krzyzewski in his last home game after 42 years and then send him into retirement at the Final Four a month later. Bad coaches don't do that, period. Bad coaches also don't win ACC regular season titles. You know the names of the guys who have won ACC regular season titles in the last 15 years? Tony Bennett 6 times, Roy Williams 5 times, Mike Krzyzewski a couple times, Leonard Hamilton had one, Jim Larinaga of Miami had a couple, Gary Williams of Maryland at the end of their tenure. I mean, most of those guys are either already in the Hall of Fame or on their way to the Hall of Fame. Hubert put his name on that list, and that deserves some street cred. That whether fans are fickle, right? And they're usually overreacting to the last thing that happened. University presidents and athletic directors, if they're good, look at a body of work. They're not overreacting with emotion and anger at the last thing that happened. That's what bad ADs do. Good ADs look at the body of work. Good ADs tell the fans to just calm down and stay in their lane. And good ADs look at the body of work. And the reality is, just as the critics are right that Hubert's second season was a train wreck, that's a fair assessment of his second season. His supporters are right that year one was phenomenal in many ways, and year three was a regular season ACC title and a Sweet 16. So is it good enough to go to the NCAA tournament twice in 4 years at a school like Carolina? No, it's not. And the critics have another fair point if Hubert misses the big dance this year. Prior to Hubert's hiring, Carolina had made 43 of the previous 46 NCAA tournaments. That's about 94%. At some schools, going half the time is insanely impressive. If you're in a one-bid league and you go to the NCAA tournament half the time, you might get a statue built of you outside the arena. Half the time at Carolina, of course, is unacceptable. But the last layer that I'll remind folks of, Carolina ultimately concluded, whether some fans disagree or not, that's a fair debate. They ultimately concluded that a mixture of Hubert's first and third year success and giving him more tools and that flushed out infrastructure that you and Coach Keating have elaborated on throughout our shows this season. John Shire had a general manager within weeks of being hired as Mike Krzyzewski's successor. Carolina's 3 years behind flushing out that basketball support staff. Duke has an analytics specialist and a player branding specialist and a name, image, likeness specialist and a portal specialist. Carolina's in the process of flushing all that out. If you believe that Hubert's a good enough coach, and you believe that with more administrative and institutional support, you'll get an even better version of Hubert Davis, that justifies why he's now extended all the way through 2030, even if, the exact timing and the details were really goofy this particular time.
Kerry, how long did it take you to sign your contract at Santa Clara?
It didn't take that long, but it wasn't that short either. And as Mike said, we actually started work without a signed contract. I mean, it happens often because of the timing of things, and it's so different, now than it was then. But the common thing is speed is always and timing is always of the essence when it comes to recruiting. You want to kind of represent properly. It took a couple months after the agreement to actually get it signed, and a little bit of haggling back and forth, but a little bit of a lower level than what we're dealing with at Carolina and the ACC, SEC schools of the world.
I tell you, David, maybe what we ought to be doing is following the lead of David McKenzie, another Triangle attorney who sued the University of North Carolina system and won $25,000 for them not following their rules. Maybe we should just sue Carolina again and again and again, and then they could be one of our partners here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I think that would be kind of funny.
That would. There's a weird thread right now in people who basically don't care what the law is and just do whatever they feel like it and wait for people to sue them. It's a very weird thread in our country as we speak, and it's a very weird thread at Carolina and in some other places in the ACC.
NC Port, raising the bacon, raising the bar.